U.S. envoy Tim Lenderking urges warring parties to engage in direct political talks. The United Nations says work on decayed sulfur tanker begins soon. Climate change and flooding aggravate suffering of displaced Yemenis. Good evening. Welcome to Yemen Today TV. I'm Amir Ali and you are watching the English news. The European Union and the United Nations signed an agreement in support of efforts at the end of the war and reach a peaceful, negotiated settlement to the conflict in Yemen. The United Mission to Yemen said that its head had signed an agreement with Hans Grundberg, the United Nations Special Envoy to Yemen, in support of the important work of his office to achieve peace in the country. The United States of America has renewed its call to the parties to the conflict in Yemen to engage positively with the peace efforts led by the United Nations. Tim Lenderking, the U.S. Special Envoy to Yemen, stressed that Yemenis, especially the Houthis, must seize the opportunity to end 80 years of devastating war through a comprehensive Yemeni-led negotiated political settlement. A recent report from the International Patent for Food Security revealed that more than half of the population suffers from acute food insecurity. The report pointed out that the high levels of food insecurity are driven by several factors, including the impact of the conflict in Yemen, international displacement, in addition to the weakness of the economy. The report concluded that despite of the slight improvement, Yemen remains one of the most food insecure countries in the world. According to the United Nations announcement, the procedures of removing the cargo of the Yemeni sulfur ship, which faces explosion danger, is set to begin. This report has more.
For years, a rusty oil tanker has been moored off war-torn Yemen, abandoned and threatening to break up or explode in what would be an ecological and humanitarian catastrophe. The United Nations announced that the process of unloading the Safer oil tanker, which is threatened to explode, of its cargo will start early next year and will extend to 18 months. According to two documents issued by the United Nations, there is a proposal for the presence of a UN coordinator in Hodeidah, and the process is linked to the success of the technical and security arrangements for the company's employees that will carry out the mission and ensuring that there are no armed elements of the Houthi militia on board the ship. According to the overview paper of the ship's unloading plan, the first step will focus on the evaluation and inception of the safer tanks, creating a safe working environment for the personnel in the ship, and preparations for transferring its cargo to another ship and subsequent operations by pumping inert gas into the tanks before the arrival of the ship that will transport the quantity. Also, the implementing team will check the structure of the tanker under the sea, close the ends of the pipeline and separate the cranes, in addition to determining whether the pipeline can be closed to prevent pollution during the separation. They will also undertake the task of partially removing the anchor chains while keeping the anchors in place, maintaining the ends of the pipeline for later connecting the vertical pipes, unloading the crude oil, separating the floating Safer oil tanker from the vertical pipelines and the mooring system, and installing new vertical hoses at the ends of the pipeline and connecting them to bio at the bottom of the sea. Solving the issue of Safer tanker is very important, as millions of people would be exposed to highly polluted air, desperate aid-dependent citizens would be deprived of supplies needed for their survival. So, the United Nations should speed up the operations to solve the problem of Safer oil tanker.
Flooding has had a huge and disastrous impact on many different governors across Yemen that have seen the highest rainfall in the last few months. Their infrastructure was destroyed and their properties were swept away. This report has more.
Many governorates across Yemen have seen the highest rainfall since July this year, with widespread destructive flash floods resulting in infrastructure, homes, food stock and livestock being washed away. Nearly 30,000 families have been affected and at least 91 people killed, a figure that is expected to rise, with many more injured or missing. The most hard-hit governorates have been Hajja, Al-Mahawit in the northwest and Ma'rib in central Yemen. However, with torrential rains forecasted to continue, casualties and destruction figures are expected to rise further throughout the country. The country has been grappling with the impact of over 7 years of conflict, resulting in one of the highest populations of internally displaced people in the world. It's therefore devastating to witness families who have been living in tents for years, struggling to access the most basic services. Even what they have been washed away and destroyed. At least 190 sites housing over 12,000 internally displaced families in Ma'rib have been damaged by flooding, alongside the communities who have been hosting them. The floods came out of nowhere. Women, elders and children wake up in their tents to water rising around them. They escape their tents, leaving everything behind. Their documents, food, clothes are washed away in a blink of an eye. 13,000 displaced families have been affected by torrential rain, floods and thunderstorms in Ma'rib Governorate. According to the IDP's management, it is expected that the number of affected families will rise in the coming days, accompanied by a weakness in the humanitarian response to relieve the affected civilians. The scale of the devastation means additional funding is urgently needed to support the affected families, who are at risk of becoming displaced once again. In flood situations, the risk of waterborne diseases such as cholera and diarrhea also increases. People who have already been struggling have seen their monthly food rations washed away. The needs are tremendous, but the coming weeks and months are critical in making sure affected families can pick themselves up and at the very least regain their lives to pre-flood days.
Attaining an education in the time of war is difficult, especially for those with disabilities. It's an ongoing fight. One school in Taiz is making strides to make education accessible to the disabled community. However, its capabilities are limited and its staff is underpaid. This report has more details.
Tawheeb, Nadim and Bashair are siblings who were born deaf and mute. They enrolled in Al Samud School for the rehabilitation of the hearing impaired in Taiz Governorate and are currently learning how to communicate in sign language. Bashair, a fourth grader, is also struggling with hemorrhagic disease. Her name is Bashair. She's one of our 4 children, 3 of whom are enrolled in this school. She suffers from hemorrhagic disease. Despite the hardships she faces, Bashair is still keen on learning and assisting her family. However, she is extremely sick. The only school in Taiz that has taken on the responsibility of educating the hearing impaired is Al Samud Governmental School, which houses 170 children. The complete workforce of the school is represented by the 30 female teachers volunteering there. They have been working diligently for years while only making meager amounts. Al Samud Governmental School is the only one in Taiz that has undertaken the task of educating the hearing impaired, and it's hosted to 170 children. The staff is entirely made up of volunteers. In addition, this building is rented. It's not government property. We request the local authorities supply us with a building to educate the children. The number of children with disabilities is growing. Limited operating funds, a lack of community awareness about the importance of their services and inclusion of children, small facilities and high demand are some of the challenges that organizations working with deaf and mute children face. The salaries we receive are insufficient, especially during these trying times. We ask that relevant authorities provide us with aid. Governmental and societal negligence have the potential to devastate the education of able children. Children with disabilities face a much worse set of circumstances.
كنت ألعب هنا بالساحة لقيته حاجة كده طويل روحت ألعب بها وانفجر راحت أصابعي الثلاث. الألغام فجروا مدرستنا، والأطفال اللي كانوا يدرسوا سافروا المدرسة، واللي يدرسوا معي عطلوا. أنا أخاف من المدرسة بها ألغام تنفجر أي وقت. أتمنى إن الألغام يرتفعوا بالمدرسة حقنا والدروس فيها. أنا فرح لأنه مشروع الأسهام يرفع على الألغام من مدرستي.
Coming up in the news. Yemen's famous artifacts are for sale in international auctions.
ننزل ندي ماء من الغيل والغيلة بعيد، كنا ندي بالدواب نعبي ماء ورجعنا. ننزل الساعة 5 رجعنا الساعة 9.
ما يجي لنا ظهر لأنه زحمة ما حد يخلي الجهل يغرق، وإحنا تعبنا زيادة.
وكنت أحس صدري يوجعني وعز قدرك ركبي يوجعيني.
كنا بنستخدم حتى نغسل أولادنا يعني بأيام معدودة.
كنت أغيب على المدرسة لأن كنت أروح الديمة.
حتى وإن كان يجي الأمطار تروح هدر لأنه ما في معي خزان.
الوقت نشتري ب30,000 هي معها استهلاك ما يغلقش معها الشهر.
بس راح تطلب الله ولا أي حاجة، عاملة كل شغلك على الماء.
Welcome back. Many students in the camp for the displaced in Ma'rib have dropped out of school for various reasons. This report has more details.
The number of students dropping out of school has increased in the camp for the displacement in Ma'rib. They dropped out for many reasons like the absence of the teachers, classrooms, and textbooks, as the percentage of students in Al Jufaina camp reached about 6,000 students, while the number of dropouts in As Suwaida camp reached about 400 male and female students. Many schools suffer from a huge pressure due to the number of displaced students and the lack of resources, which exposes them to closure. The first half of the year is nearly ending and hundreds of students are still without education and outside the educational system.
The number of drop-out of schools students reached about 6,400. In Al Jufaina camp there are 6,000 students and in Al Suwaida camp 400 students. This happening due to the hard living conditions, interruption of salaries, not providing transportation for students, and no textbooks. Al Kuwait school has about 1,000 students, 22 teachers, and 12 classrooms.
Official information from the Executive Unit for the Management of Camps for the Displaced confirms that 6,000 students in Al Jufaina camp are without education, and it's the largest camp for the displaced in the governorate, while the number of dropouts in As Suwaida camp west of the city has reached about 400 students.
I used to go to Al Kuwait school, but then I dropped out after it closed. After that, I went to Ajyal Saba school, but it's overcrowded and I couldn't find a place there, and I had no textbooks.
Here in the west of the governorate, inside the Suwaida camp, the child Ghassan finds himself without a school to study in. After the Kuwait school closed its doors due to the lack of school classes, the absence of teachers, and interruption of salaries. The hard living conditions has deprived him from going to school, and now he spends most of his time with the company of others who are also cut off from education inside the camp.
One of the reasons why schools shut down is the interruption of salaries, in addition to the overcrowding in classrooms, as it has about 120 students. How can a teacher teach this much of students in one classroom? There are about 400 dropout school students. We call on the UNICEF and authorities to find a solution.
The war that has been going on in the country for 8 years has caused great damage to the educational sector in most Yemeni governorates, and tens of thousands of male and female students have been displaced, with thousands of families under extremely hard living conditions. There are no radical solutions to solve the education crisis in the camps for the displaced in Ma'rib, except for initiatives by organizations to open educational schools every year, but they are soon left without teachers and textbooks.
Head of the Presidential Leadership Council revealed that the International Monetary Fund agreed to facilitate Yemen's withdrawal with $300 million. The withdrawal came from the fund's special drawing rights to strengthen the accounts of the Central Bank of Yemen. During his meeting in Aden, he said that this step will enhance confidence in the national currency and improve the living conditions of citizens. The governor of Al Mahra called on companies to invest in the fishing sector. He expressed that the local authority is prepared to provide all facilities in accordance with the laws. The governor directed to come up with solutions to the problems faced by the traders and investors within the framework of encouraging them and providing them with possible facilities. The Houthi militia looted tens of millions of rials in the first week of a traffic campaign that was prepared in Sana'a. Security sources confirmed that the traffic campaign resulted in the detention of 4,750 vehicles, which generated tens of millions in revenues. The Houthi militia carried out the campaign to raise its resources for the benefits of its leaders under legal cover. Healthcare services in Aden served around 3,000 students and educational staff. The Director General of the School Health Department explained that the project aims to contribute to achieving disease control system. He also praised the great efforts made by international association by supporting school health activities throughout the governorate. About 100 artifacts have come out of the country in several ways, whether through sale, theft, looting, and smuggling. This report has more details.
A Yemeni researcher assured that Al Jawf and Shabwa are the most affected governorates of artifact smuggling, and these antiquities are being sold in international auctions, which raises a lot of questions regarding the Houthi looting of Yemen's history. He noted that auctions will sell more than 6,000 ancient artifacts from around the world, including copper pieces looted from Yemeni museums and cultural heritage sites. Yemen is home to 4 UNESCO World Heritage Sites and recently joined a 1970 convention against trafficking. In addition to Britain, Yemeni artifacts are also traded in the United States, and U.S. officials have been working to curb sales. While some pieces in the current auction have an identifiable origin, others do not, making it unclear when they were taken, and the lack of proper identification as well as the ongoing destruction of museums and archaeological sites further contributes to the elimination of Yemeni cultural memory. Monuments have been damaged, looted, and their artifacts have been smuggled out of the country. This is particularly the case for sites within conflict areas. And the wider the current conflict spreads, the more danger is posed to old towns and other historic locations where combat groups have rooted themselves with catastrophic consequences. UNESCO was informed of damage to sites of outstanding cultural significance in Yemen. Therefore, they called on all parties in the conflict to protect Yemen's cultural heritage and refrain from targeting by shelling or by airstrikes or using for military purposes cultural heritage sites and buildings. People of Yemen feel they are losing their identity, as when someone erases the past, citizens lose not just information, but ways for people to talk about their history.
Here is a reminder of the main headlines. U.S. envoy Tim Linder King urges warring parties to engage in direct political talks. The United Nations says work on decayed sulfur tankers begins soon. Climate change and flooding aggravate suffering of displaced Yemenis. This is the end of the news. It was Abir Ali. Thank you for watching.